The latest now on the Trump transition. 17 days until the inauguration, and the president-elect is back to business and back on Twitter. We're going to hear from his senior advisor, Kellyanne Conway, in just a moment. But first, ABC's Cecilia Vega is at Trump Tower here in New York. Good morning, Cecilia.
Robin, a new year, a new tweet storm. As you said, his inauguration is just days away, but Donald Trump is now on Twitter, at least, looking backward to that big November win, taking another victory lap. Fresh off his big New Year's bash in Mar-a-Lago.
All I can tell you is we're going to do a good job. Okay?
Donald Trump is ringing in 2017 with a Twitter blitz, and it seems no subject is off limits. The president-elect writing, North Korea just stated that it is in the final stages of developing a nuclear weapon capable of reaching parts of the U.S. It won't happen. Plus a jab at Chicago's mayor on that city's murder rate. If mayor can't do it, he must ask for federal help. Even a complaint about a new book. Trump writing, it used the worst cover photo of me. Just 17 days to go until inauguration, Trump is promising something else on the calendar first. Big news on those Russian hacks.
I also know things that other people don't know, and so they cannot be sure of the situation.
Like what do you know that other people don't know?
You'll find out on Tuesday or Wednesday.
He's still doubting evidence from 17 U.S. intelligence agencies who say they have concrete proof of Russia's involvement.
I want them to be sure. I think it's unfair if they don't know.
And Donald Trump is back here in New York now. He's got meetings today right here in Trump Tower, including with Mike Pence. Everyone, George, is waiting to see if today might be the day that he releases whatever this new information he says he has on those Russian hackers. George?
And Conway about that, but now that the new Congress is back for its first day of business, so much on its plate, from repeal of Obamacare, tax reform, confirming Trump nominees. So let's bring in our congressional correspondent, Mary Bruce. And Mary, even before the official swearing in today, the House GOP voted overnight to take away the power and independence of the Congressional Ethics Office.
George, this came as a total surprise. Late last night, behind closed doors, House Republicans moved to effectively gut their own watchdog. The Independent Ethics Office was created to keep lawmakers in check, to help investigate any allegations of their own wrongdoing. But now Republicans want to move that office under their own control, saying it will help create a fairer process. But even Republican leaders are frustrated and Democrats are outraged. It's a sour note to kick off the first day of the new GOP-led Congress. George?
Packed schedule, Mary, for this Congress, including getting those Trump cabinet nominees confirmed. Those confirmation hearings scheduled to start soon.
Yeah, and Democrats are ready to go to battle over those confirmation hearings, specifically targeting 8 of Trump's picks. They want those nominees to release more of their personal financial records. And if they don't, George, get ready for a long, drawn-out fight here on Capitol Hill.
Thanks, Mary. Let's get more on this now from Donald Trump's senior advisor, Kellyanne Conway. Welcome back. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, George.
So let's start out with this congressional action. President-elect Trump famously promised to drain the swamp in Washington. He wanted real reform. So is this what he had in mind? Does he support what they've done?
I haven't discussed this with the president-elect directly, but let's make clear that you're still going to have an Office of Complaint Review. In other words, it's not like we're taking away.
But now it's under oversight of the Republican majority in Congress. It's not independent.
Well, but the full House will vote on it today, and the Democrats will have their say. Certainly, they're part of the House. But look, there's a very ambitious agenda to push forward. The Republicans have been given the majority in the House and the Senate, most of the governorships. They've won over 1,000 state legislative seats under President Obama's watch. So there's a mandate there for them to make significant change.
But is this the way to start gutting the Independent Ethics Office?
Well, but again, gutting it doesn't mean that there won't be a mechanism. I don't want your viewers to be given the impression, George, that there's no way for complaints to be reviewed. But there's also been an overzealousness in some of the processes over the years. And we don't want people wrongly accused, and we don't want people mired in months, if not years, of ethical complaint review.
Let's talk about North Korea. They are signaling they may test an intercontinental missile. We saw that tweet from President-elect Trump saying it won't happen. So does that mean he's going to order the military to shoot down a North Korean missile test?
It doesn't mean anything like that at the moment. He's not president yet, and he's not making policy at the moment. We still have a president for the next 17 days, George. At the same time, President Trump will be very tough on those who are developing nuclear capability. It's been a big disappointment to many Americans, including the president-elect, that Iran, for example, was emboldened and increased its nuclear capability through one of the deals that this administration has put forward.
But their program is now on hold. What about North Korea? You know, there's so few avenues, so few tools to stop them. What is the president-elect suggesting he's going to do?
He has not stated that publicly, and he won't before he's inaugurated. But we do know that there are sanctions that are possible. They haven't always worked. I think China would have to have a significant role here as well. But he's putting them on notice. He's putting North Korea on notice through this tweet and through other statements that this won't happen. He, as President of the United States, wants to stand between them and their missile capabilities, which experts say could be deployed to reach Seattle almost immediately.
Finally, on that Russian hacking, you know, so many people were caught by surprise by those comments by Mr. Trump over the weekend saying he knows things that other people don't know about the Russian hacking. What was he referring to?
Well, presidents and president-elects have to know things that you and I don't know. I sure hope they do. He's privy to intelligence briefings of all sorts. He has the presidential daily briefing, which is a product, but he has other briefings. And today he is...
But it's the consensus of those intelligence briefings that Russia was behind it.
Well, Julian Assange of WikiLeaks said just yesterday in an interview that will be aired tonight on a different network that it was not a political party and it was not
So is that
Russia.
what Mr. Trump was referring to?
No, he's not referring to that. But he also has said as president-elect that he is receiving an intelligence briefing from our top intelligence officials from across this country here in New York early this week. And he plans to do that. And the reason he's doing that is because he wants the information. You know, there's
But he
so
was
much
saying he already knew
insinuation
something on
into it.
Saturday that we don't know.
Well, he does know things that we don't know. We see a lot of blind quotes. We see a lot of unsourced information. There were CIA operatives, George, who were invited to testify before the House Intelligence Committee and refused to show up and instead are leaking to the press. This is not how we as Americans want our intelligence to necessarily work. Look, at the in the Trump administration, we believe that politics should not interfere in our intelligence, but we also believe that intelligence should not interfere in our politics.
So if those intelligence officials come to the president-elect today or tomorrow, whenever that briefing is, and say, we know Russia was behind it, will he accept it?
He'll have to see all the evidence. He'll have to see what's in the briefing. And remember, you're not saying it now, but many people on TV try to conflate any Russian hacking that may have occurred with the election results. And that has been conflated, unfortunately, where people are still trying to find a reason why Hillary Clinton lost. You can't deny it because on every other network, on everything, everyone who makes a statement about the Russian hacking these days are saying, aha, and that's why Hillary Clinton lost. I think it was very embarrassing to the Clinton operation to have the content of those emails revealed to the country. That's what they really don't like about it, that they were questioning Hillary Clinton's judgment. Can she find her voice? People were calling Chelsea Clinton a spoiled brat. It was a very uncomfortable situation for them.
Kellyanne Conway, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
And we do expect that intelligence briefing today.
We do. And we do know 17 days until the inauguration. We're going to go to Amy now, the morning's other top stories.
Breaking news. President-elect Donald Trump is breaking his silence on President Obama's new sanctions targeting Russia. In a statement, he says this: "It's time for our country to move on to bigger and better things. Nevertheless, in the interest of our country and its great people, I will meet with leaders of the intelligence community next week in order to be updated on the facts of this situation." Sunlen Sarfati is outside Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort tonight. Sunlen, what's the very latest from there?
Well, Kate, that short two-line statement coming from President-elect Trump tonight really keeping in line with the posture that he's taken publicly in the past. He has in the past said point blank that he really doesn't think Russia was involved in these hacks and really tried to deflect blame away from them. And this statement tonight that he released, in essence, really keeps in line with that. He's basically saying those things by saying, let's move on, let's move away from all of this. But he is doing some due diligence in announcing that he will sit down with the intelligence community for a briefing at some point that will happen next week. But the big thing that this statement does not answer, though, is whether President-elect Donald Trump intends to reverse those sanctions once he does take office after January 20th, when he's sworn in next month. A White House advisor today is saying that doesn't make a lot of sense, saying that that would be highly unusual move for the president-elect to take once he becomes president. So tonight, Kate, that's still a big TBD coming from the Trump administration.
Sunlen, thank you so much. Out front now, counselor to President-elect Donald Trump, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, thanks for taking the time.
Hi, Kate.
So first I want to ask you about the breaking news tonight. I see this statement from the president-elect, but what was his reaction when he learned of President Obama's announcement today against Russia?
His reaction is reflected in his statement, Kate. He'll receive an intelligence briefing in this coming week. And in the meantime, he believes it's time to move on. And I mean, I've been reading all the news reports about these retaliations, these sanctions put forward by President Obama and his administration. Some of them seem largely symbolic. The GRU doesn't really travel here, doesn't keep its assets here. There's no indication our allies will follow suit. And we're yet to see all of the intelligence reports, and we would be the president-elect. So he'll have that briefing next week. But in the meantime, he repeated today what he said last night to reporters here at Mar-a-Lago, which is he believes it's time to move on to bigger and better things for the country.
I want to ask you about that. I mean, the statement says time to move on to bigger and better things, as you just said. What does that mean?
It means exactly what the president-elect has said, which is we've been talking about this for a while. I think that, all we heard all through the election was Russia, Russia, Russia. Whenever it came to anything Donald Trump said or did, it seemed most days. And now, since the election, it's just this fever pitch of accusations and insinuations. And we know why Hillary Clinton lost. I think the cues and clues are pretty obvious. They were obvious to us all along. They're very obvious to everyone now. And I don't believe Vladimir Putin deterred her from competing in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, states that Donald Trump carried for the first time as a Republican in decades.
I think what a lot of people want to know is that, of course, the president-elect can reverse all of this when he takes office in a very short time. Will he reverse these actions taken by President Obama?
I won't make a statement on that at all tonight. I will tell you that even those who are sympathetic to President Obama on most issues are saying that part of the reason he did this today was to, quote, box in President-elect Trump. That would be very unfortunate if that were if politics were the motivating factor here. But we can't help but think that that's often true. Even the New York Times characterized it as such, that this may be an attempt to box him in to see what he'll do as president. That's not the way that peaceful transitions of administrations work in our great democcy.
You think these serious actions
at the moment
that
the president-elect has spoken his piece on this.
Kellyanne, you think these very serious and unprecedented actions that President Obama took today, expelling 35 diplomats, giving them 72 hours to leave the country, sanctioning foreign intelligence services, you think that President Obama did that just to box in Donald Trump?
No, I was actually quoting David Sanger's piece in the New York Times, where he says in one of the opening paragraphs that this could also be an attempt to box in President-elect Trump. And I'm merely saying, if the New York Times report is true and credible, that would be an unfortunate rationale here on top of any other rationales. You're right, Kate, it is unprecedented. I don't think at the height of the Cold War that this country expelled that many operatives. So I know the president is looking tough in his last couple of weeks. First, I would call them sanctions against Israel over this past weekend, and now sanctions against Russia. But the fact is that we'll see. The word symbolic is being used also by the New York Times and other such, I think, pro-Obama administration outlets. So we'll see if this has teeth, and we'll see if some of our allies follow suit.
Does the president-elect now believe that Russia is behind the hacks?
The president-elect stands by his statements, and in fact, he'll receive an intelligence briefing this coming week, probably in New York. I was in a meeting today where that was discussed, and perhaps he'll receive additional information then. But based on what he knows now, and based on what we see as leaked information to the press rather than CIA officials attending House Intelligence Committee briefings where they were invited to do so. I mean, if some of them would prefer to talk to the media off the record than actually participate in the process, and then we're left with, some confusion.
I'm sure he
and
could
some
get that intelligence briefing, right, if he wanted to.
He'll be briefed he will be briefed further this week, but that's all I can say about it now. But Kate, let's be honest too. Every time Russian hacking is mentioned now, since Hillary Clinton lost, and it wasn't a squeaker, we got 306 electoral votes. That was 36 more than we needed. She lost states that Democrats hadn't lost in decades. Ever since then, the issue of Russian hacking has been discussed in context of the election. And that's where the president is saying that we should move on. And we should move on because the idea that there's a nexus between
I don't think anyone at this
the
point,
hacking and the election
I don't think at this point people are questioning the validity of the election. I don't think so. What we're hearing
many are.
But what this is about this is serious. This is about a foreign country hacking into the United States electoral process, regardless, and it doesn't even have to do with the result even. It's more that they tried to.
Well, you just said electoral
did.
process. well, but remember too, this is really about the DNC's breach. They didn't have the proper security, I guess the protocols in place, and someone was able to hack the information. And we are not in favor of foreign governments interfering in our elections or interfering in our intelligence. But we're also not in favor of our intelligence interfering with elections after the fact. And the case is, I mean, you may feel that way, Kate, you may run your shows that way, but the fact is, in many different places, in print, on TV, on radio, on Twitter, on Facebook, ad nauseum, people are trying to create a nexus and still trying to fight the last war. And frankly, it's 52 days later. And that nexus is something that's been trying to be proven at a fever pitch since November 8th. And that's part of why the president-elect has said move on. He also says it because he is, as I said, next week going to receive additional intelligence briefings. But he's been very clear on this. And, you know, to talk any further about it actually is to violate what everybody insists we have, which is one president at a time, which, of course, I agree with.
We know that the big focus right now for the president-elect, understandably, is crafting his inaugural speech. Kellyanne, where is his head right now on that speech?
He's very engaged. So much of this is his own personal flourish, his words, repeating his vision for the country. I know it's been reported, and it is accurate, Kate, to say that the president-elect has been focused on past inaugural addresses, certainly putting his personal stamp on his, but also talking to people about President Reagan, President John F. Kennedy, President Lincoln's inaugural addresses as examples. He certainly is aware of everyone's inaugural addresses, and different times call for, and different men call for different inaugural addresses. But this one will be very much Donald J. Trump's inaugural address in his own words. He's consulting with us, Stephen Miller, his brilliant speechwriter and policy chief, has the largest hand in this right now, working with the president-elect. But others of us are certainly offering our counsel, but you will see a product much like the victory speech in those wee hours of November 9th. That is all Donald Trump. These will be his words and his ideas, his vision for the future.
Kellyanne Conway, thanks so much, Kellyanne.
Thank you, Kate. Happy New Year.
Thank you too. Out front next, Donald Trump planning a short inauguration speech on the biggest day of his life. Why? Plus, increased security after ISIS-inspired truck-style attacks. Now, how authorities are taking extreme measures to protect Americans on New Year's Eve. The details ahead.
Hey, with us now, we got senior advisor to Trump's transition team and incoming counselor to the president, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Good morning. So
the New York Times says that my Republican Party and your Republican Party, House members decided last night they were going to gut the ethics office. Is that inconsistent, do you think, as we do?
It's not true.
With Donald Trump's effort to drain the swamp?
It depends what happens with the new office, Joe. So the full House will vote on this today. That was just a committee, a blind vote. But I don't want your viewers to be left with the impression that there's no mechanism to investigate ethics complaints, particularly ethics complaints that come from constituents, which the former office has been entertaining. This was in reaction to a 2008 scandal. There have been about 100 or so complaints since, only a third of which have been referred to the House Ethics Committee. And I think one thing that they're trying to curb is the abuse of the process that has led to some of those being investigated, either House members or their staffers and witnesses. Some of them have complained that they've been denied or had their due process rights compromised. So a more fair process, you can't have. If this actually passes in full, Joe, you could not have an anonymous tip anymore. If you want to come forward as a constituent, you can do that, but you have to show some evidence. You have to show some grounding, and
but isn't that a problem?
Not
being able to have an anonymous tip coming in. What if you're a staff member and you know something, and you're afraid of retribution?
Exactly.
So
anonymous tips can be really valuable.
You can also put evidence in front of them, documents, without having your name put out there and getting fired.
So the House Ethics Committee, which would oversee this new organization, they have many mechanisms in place where you can effectuate the kind of hypothetical that you're putting forth. But I don't want people to feel like ethics is gone. I mean, there are many ways for constituents particularly to make their voices and their
So
concerns.
let's just talk about the timing. Why do it now? Why have this be the first thing that defines your incoming?
I think it caught some people by surprise because it was done through a blind ballot. But again, the full House has to vote on this today.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the Democrats and others who object, they'll have an opportunity to be heard, and they can certainly.
But are you here
lodge.
today saying that the president-elect approves of what the House Republicans did?
No, I haven't discussed this with him.
So you don't know what his position on it, but you sounds like you're pretty favorable towards
No,
it.
I didn't say that. I'm just saying that I'm trying to explain. Joe asked me the question about, is it inconsistent with draining the swamp? I'm trying to explain, based on what I know, what I read in my own reporting to the reporters around the table, why this happened. But of course, the leadership opposed it as well.
Well, leadership opposed it because it does weaken, it weakens that sort of scrutiny that, that frankly, Congress ought to have. I mean, to me, and that's why Paul Ryan opposed it, and Kevin McCarthy opposed it. And it would be great to know what the president-elect thinks about it, because he says he's going to drain the swamp. So is this draining the swamp?
So the votes today, right?
Turn out the lights and let us do whatever we want to do.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that would be the effect, in fairness.
Well, no anonymous trips, no public statements coming from this office, no nothing. That's turning out the lights.
You're saying you're personally not taking a position on it. You don't know what the president-elect's position on it. But is this a good start for the new House, do you think?
I think a great start is tomorrow when Vice President-elect Pence will be on Capitol Hill. I'll be joining him as well, other members of the senior team, to talk about, Mark, exactly how to repeal and replace Obamacare.
But is this a great start?
We have a great start this week. This is the first time in 9 years you have Republicans having the House and the Senate and, of course, the White House now. And it's a very exciting time because these folks have a mandate from the public to go ahead and repeal and replace Obamacare. You know, President Obama was elected in 2008, and then there were 4 elections after that, 10, 12, 14, 16. The only time that the Democrats won after that was in his re-elect in 2012 because the Republicans weren't really able to talk about repealing and replacing Obamacare as much in 2012. But in 2010, 14, and indeed this year in 16, Obamacare was on the ballot. People want it repealed and replaced. They want better access. They want to purchase their health care across state lines. They certainly want to block grant Medicaid to the states. They want health savings accounts so that you have a health insurance policy that has your name on it, where you can control spending.
That will now, just to complete the discussion, that will now be the second thing they do, right? Because the first thing they do was getting rid of the ethics.
Let's see what happens this afternoon with the vote.
Right.
I've got to believe if Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy, who's going to be on the show later, going to tell the people, the 40 or 50 or people that voted against this the first time, we need you on the House floor. And we're going to roll the people, and we're going to teach them a lesson. They need to listen to their speaker and follow their speaker. So I think I'll judge later on today to see how it starts.
And it's transparency. You're right. It's democracy and transparency.
So let's talk about really quickly Obamacare. I understand Paul Ryan and the House, they want to get rid of Obamacare and then worry about what they replace it with down the road. The president-elect has said, no, we want to replace it. There has to be a replacement mechanism in place right when we repeal it, so we don't even go 2 days without people off of health insurance. Is that still where he is, that there must be a replace mechanism there when they repeal?
That's the ideal situation, Joe. Let's see what happens practically. Some experts say that it could take years to actually complete the process, but there's no question that there will be different health insurance coverage in this country under President Trump. And he's got his vice president-elect starting the process just tomorrow. Interestingly, at a competing time when President Obama is going to meet with House Democrats.
If Americans have health care today under the Affordable Care Act, will they have health care? It sounds like Donald Trump is saying they will have health care.
Yes, he is.
Under whatever replaces it.
That is correct. We don't want anyone who currently has insurance to not have insurance. Also, we are very aware that the public likes coverage for pre-existing conditions. There are some pieces of merit in the current plan. What's happened, though, Joe, is that you have women, particularly chief healthcare officers of their households. 2 out of every 3 healthcare dollars in this country are controlled by women. We're disproportionately the consumers, but we're also disproportionately the providers of health care. And so the concern across the board is, what do we do about all the people who said, you know, I liked my health insurance before, and you didn't tell me that my premiums were going to go up 116% Arizona, 53% in Pennsylvania. I was going to get fewer choices, lower quality, less access. You've got that, and then you've got this whole raft of people in this country who really were relying on the Affordable Care Act to give them coverage, and instead what happened to them is they now have 2 jobs, 25, 26 hours apiece, and no health care benefits.
But again,
Kellyanne, right now, do you or do you not have a replacement plan ready to go, ramped up, ready to go, say, tomorrow?
We have pieces of it that we need to discuss. Well, but we don't have an HHS secretary confirmed yet. Go ask Minority Leader Schumer and the rest if they're going to give him a fair hearing, if they're even going to meet with him. I mean, we're ready to go, but we're not the only party. We're certainly in the majority party. We need some help, and we need some assistance by the Democrats to at least be fair and have meetings and, of course, timely and fair.
So you're asking
processes.
the Democrats to be as fair as the Republicans were?
They were very fair. Oh, excuse me. President Obama had 7 of his cabinet members confirmed on January 20, 2009, on his inauguration day. You're going to guarantee me the same courtesy? It doesn't sound that way if you read The Hill and the Washington Post yesterday. And then he had 5 more that week. President Bush had 9 his first week. He had state and defense and ag and commerce and education and energy and treasury. Are we going to have that? It doesn't seem that way.
Let's go to Casey Hunt in Washington. She's got a question.
Kellyanne, I want to ask you about this information that Mr. Trump has said he has about what happened with the Russians and the election. He says he knows things that other people don't know. Are these things that the intelligence community doesn't know, in his view? Or how would you characterize the information he says that he has?
Well, every president, and in this case, President-elect Casey, knows things that the rest of us don't, and they should, because they're the commander-in-chief and president.
Is it the intelligence community that's telling him? Because he now needs this assessment. I mean, where is he learning this information?
He gets all types of briefing. He's going to be president of the United States in 17 short days. He receives a presidential daily briefing. That's a product. But in addition, he has any number of intelligence sources and briefings on any given day. And as your viewers should know, Casey, the president-elect, has agreed to receive a top-level intelligence briefing from our top intelligence officials in this country here in New York, specifically on this allegation of Russian hacking.
And when's that going to be?
Could be today.
Could be today.
Early this week.
Okay, great. All right, Kellyanne, thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having me.
We greatly appreciate you being here. And coming up next, Noah Oppenheim's screenplay for the new film Jackie has received critical acclaim, won a major screenplay prize, and is getting a lot of early Oscar buzz. But we're going to find out where that achievement stacks up in Noah's career and compared to his first job as executive producer of Scarborough Country. Noah joins us straight ahead.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.